I'm Kevin Kincaid. I'm the CEO of Knoxville Hospital and Clinics, and this is the Prairie Farms Podcast.
I'm Mark Kenyon.
I'm Dr. Julie Meechan.
I'm Steve Hansen.
I'm Jill Bebout.
Chad Gravy.
My name is Jeremy French.
I'm Laura Walter.
Carol Hawksbury, owner of Hoxie Native Seeds, and this is the Prairie Farm Podcast.
This is Hal Herring, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Podcast.
Skip Sly, Iowa Whitetail.
Valerie Van Coten, State Historical Society of Iowa.
Dr. Matt Helmer at Iowa State University.
My name is Kyle Laubarger with the Native Habitat Project.
I'm Judd McCullum. I appeared out of the wilderness, and this is the Prairie Farm Podcast.
Welcome to the Prairie Farm Podcast.
At Hoxie Native Seeds, our mission is to provide native seed and education for landowners and land managers that care about their ground. So the education, we're doing that through the podcast and interviewing experts and the stuff we put out through our website. But the native seed that we provide, whether we grew it or we work with other producers that grew it, we are here to provide that for you. It's what keeps the lights on for us, and it's what we love to do. Most of our seeds grown right here on our farm, hoxieNativeSeeds.com. Oh, and if you need a little help with consultation, not sure what to put on your ground, we would be happy to help you with that as well. Give us a call, hoxieNativeSeeds.com. Man, I think people, I am very biased towards Knoxville, but I think people think that I just like pick whoever I want from Knoxville. But you have way more credentials than just CEO of Knoxville's hospital. I believe our community is super privileged to have you here. But you've done a bunch of other stuff, including work on a nuclear submarine.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't listen to my podcast, Kent. Man, you're a fake friend.
You haven't ran your podcast in over a year.
No, it's been just under a year.
Just under a year.
Just
okay.
under a year, yeah.
And that's not true. I have listened to a lot of your podcasts. But
that's fair.
So what were you doing on a nuclear submarine?
Well, I went in and I was a sonar tech, and after I was
you were serving in the Navy?
Yeah.
Wow.
I was on
Thank you for your service.
a ballistic missile submarine out of Holy Loch, Scotland.
Wow.
Which is, basically you drive around and...
Is that the Loch Ness monster
not,
area?
I've been there. I went there when we were in dry dock, so that was cool.
Yeah.
Iverness, I believe, is the town that's closest to there. But so I had a ballistic missile submarine, so we carried, when we went out to sea, I believe the number was we were considered the fifth most powerful nation in the world, that submarine by itself once it submerged, just with our firepower that we carried on board. So a lot of destructive power. And basically at that time you drove around in a predetermined area for us it was the North Atlantic, and we had pre-targeted missiles for the most part, and
so cool.
We drove around at launch depth and floated a wire, stayed in constant communication, and were ready to launch missiles. I did that for a few patrols, and then I ended up in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, clear over on the Pacific side on a fast attack submarine, which was a completely different world. And we went out and kind of found trouble on that. We did a lot of intelligence gathering and did all sorts of things. This was in the late 80s, so we're talking the Cold War, so cat and mouse with the Soviet Union for the almost exclusively. And so, it was super interesting life. And then when I decided, I loved that job, to be honest, the ears of the sub, and essentially the eyes as well, and being able to listen to things in the ocean and get good at what you're hearing, and then use the computer technology we had at the time to refine it. But no, I could tell the difference between, hey, that's a submerged submarine making steam noise, that's a nuclear sub and it's not one of ours, versus that's a fishing trawler, or that's biologics, a bunch of whales or shrimp making noise. I love that job. But
was that scary if it was another nuclear submarine that wasn't yours?
It was interesting for sure, because you had to figure out who it was, and at the time, we were so far superior in our ability to remain undetected and quiet. And I like to feel we still are, but I'm not in the know right now, that we followed Soviet submarines all over the Pacific Ocean sometimes we'd get within just a few feet. I mean, a few feet
That's
of them,
crazy.
and they not know we're there.
Wow.
And so that is kind of some interesting stuff, but I felt like we were the best. We were the best, and we were good because we were the best. We had the best equipment and the best training.
$1 million, 3 weeks on the submarine, Kent. You doing it?
I'd do
Oh,
it. Just for, I mean, I'd be claustrophobic and everything probably, but just that is something that has always fascinated me. Not like to the point where it's like, I'm a little kid just like researching everything I can about, but I've just always been that at school. In fact, I think, man, I've met so many thousands of people in my life. I think you're the first person I've ever met to have been on an operating submarine. That's really interesting.
It was a super interesting story. It's where you can travel around the world and see none of it. But,
did you ever see any horrifying creatures?
That's what I want to know.
Well,
the spookiest thing you came across?
I mean, just some oddball things. Like, so when you say sea, other than the small glass on a periscope, there's nothing you can see.
Yeah,
It's
not like the Atlantis or something. But one of the things that is things that you hear that you don't know what that is. Or in the Indian Ocean one time, there was this feeling like we hit something. Like could feel it, because if you're submerged, I'm going to say below, say 400 feet, maybe 600 feet, the sub feels like in this room. There's no movement. There's no nothing.
Even if you're moving.
Yeah, you're moving, but it feels very solid because the sea's not really moving you around. Now, if you start coming up, especially in the North Atlantic, you start coming up to a couple hundred feet, the rough seas there, you're going to feel that, and you're going to start tipping and turning, and then you'll be reminded you're on a boat. But when you so in that very stable environment, you can feel very small things, and it felt like we hit something, and we just never would know. But, there was we almost lost a sub just outside of Guam a few years ago that hit an undersea mountain at flying speed. And it tore like the whole front of the sub off. They almost lost the sub. There was at least one sailor died. A lot of people got hurt, just hit an underwater mountain. And because you can't, and that's the thing about
they don't have the topography dialed in.
But mountains are changing. These are and we like to think we know a lot about the ocean floor, but there's a lot of things that aren't mapped to the detail that you need.
Yeah, isn't it the moon has been explored more thoroughly than the deepest parts of our ocean?
Yeah, and we're not going there, but certainly one of the
Guam's
things
pretty close to there.
People don't understand is that our secret sauce in the submarine service, which we're referred to as the silent service, and because that is your competitive advantage, that you are so quiet, no one knows you're there, and you can do what you want. So you can rest assured we got folks around the world that are doing what needs to be done, and no one knows they're there.
Yeah,
and that's a pretty cool feeling that we're that good at that. But what that means is, like, when you hear think about the sound of submarines, like on the movies you'll hear ping. That's active sonar, which would tell you, hey, there's something up there, because you'd have that reflective sound waves. Well, we rarely do that, because if you light off active sonar, everybody in the world knows, well, we know now where you are, and we probably through intelligence know what the hertz or the tonals are of that particular submarine's active sonar, and then they got you pegged. So we just didn't do that very often. I mean, it's extremely rare. So you're going off charts.
Yeah,
they're not perfect.
It's just such a weird. It's kind of like the first time. I remember when I was in high school, I worked for the school district I was attending, and they would let us. operate equipment that we had no business operating as 16-year-olds. And one of the first things that kind of threw my mind, it was very simple, but I had to drive this big box truck loaded up with school supplies or whatever from one school to the next. I remember I went to look up at the rear view mirror, to like back up. And I'm like, wait a minute. There's no turning around and looking behind me. I have to rely solely on these mirrors here to not run somebody or something over when I go to back up. And, it's kind of like I'm very dependent on this equipment that's here to trust it. Or if you ever use like adaptive cruise control on a vehicle.
Oh, yeah.
The first time you're like, I'm just totally reliant on this equipment. But for a submarine, you literally can't look out the window and double check. You can't get out and open your door and see where are you. It's completely on the equipment alone.
And just the physics itself, that people that so you have what we call the main ballast tanks or ballast tanks throughout the sub, which helps us stay level when we move water from one tank to another. But we have these huge tanks, and that's how it submerges. I mean, you flood in thousands and thousands of gallons of seawater and fill up these tanks, and that's how you submerge. And then you've got, kind of like aircraft, you've got fairwater planes and stern planes that control your depth along with your propulsion. And so like the USS Thrasher that one of the nuclear subs, one of only 2 nuclear subs that we've lost, that created what was called the sub-safe program, like a lot more safety and the ability to get that water out of those ballast tanks should you need to go to the surface in a hurry.
Sure.
You have because the 2 things on a sub that are like horrific is flood and fire. Those are the 2 things that there's no place for those toxic fumes to go. You have a major fire on a sub and it becomes uncontrollable. It's a highly oxygenated environment. Fires are a bad deal. Flooding, obviously. But when you're at depth under pressure, a small hole in, say some sort of seawater pipe can create massive flooding and a lot of, really get your attention in a hurry. But it's a unique thing, because the only limiting factor of how long a modern submarine can stay out at sea is food. Because you have unlimited propulsion, you have nuclear power, it's unlimited. You make your own water, you make your own oxygen. You could stay out forever, but you run out of food.
Calories,
and so that's.
How do you not hate the people you're in a tiny box with?
Oh, you hate a few.
That's fair. That's fair.
But the desire to survive is what unites everybody.
And there is a brotherhood that is hard to imagine. Say if you go out to sea with 180 people on this incredibly cramped quarters and you're hot racking, which means 3 people to 2 beds. You have to rotate who's sleeping when. The only social part of the place is, chow hall and food's always good on sub, which is kind of interesting. Weight management became a problem on submarines because if you're exercising, you have a chance of making noise. Like you can't have barbells. You drop them on the floor and that could be a death sentence if you're in the wrong, you can't do that. So, it was hard to exercise. It was hard. Food was good. So, but my point with that is that these people everything about them, by the time and you just become extremely tight and you like anything, you throw 180 people together, you're not going to like them all.
Yeah.
And they're not all going to like you.
180 people on that sub?
Yeah, that'd be a rough number.
How big is the sub?
Well, depending on what kind it was, the ballistic missile submarine, which has a giant 3-story missile compartment, is maybe between 400 and 500 feet long.
I did not realize that.
These things are big. These things are very, very big. And then the Fast Attack was like 280 some feet long, but they're not designed for that many people. So that's why as these ships are built, and then they come up with, hey, let's put this new piece of equipment in. Well, living quarters is what gets sacrificed for that, sort of thing. So really the boats would go at sea, depending on what your mission, the ballistic missile submarine had one mission only, and that's to be launch ready at all times and remain undetected. That was your only job. And then on Fast Attacks, of course, you're picking up, depending on what you're being sent out to do for intelligence gathering, you might stop and pick up specialized linguists or people that have in the intelligence community where we can pop up the periscope and look at something, and then they can tell us what we're looking for, take pictures and all that kind of stuff, or make recordings. And so Fast Attack life was amazing. I didn't appreciate it, but the guys that were married, it was kind of interesting because the ballistic missile submarine, you were out and you were in, and everybody, your family knew when you left, and they had a real good idea when you were coming home. The Fast Attack world, it would be like, hey, we're going to leave on Monday morning, and we're going to go test some equipment, and we'll be back next Monday. We're going to go do some sea trials, and we're going to, do some drills and things. Then we pick up a Soviet boat, or we get orders to go do something. There's no mail service or telephone communications, and we may be gone for a month or two. So could you imagine, like your family, Dad didn't come home, and I don't know when he's coming home. It's that family sacrifice around subservice. I mean, there's any military thing has this huge burden on families. It's huge. But the uniqueness of submarines was the lack of the ability to have any kind of communication. I mean, we would have the things called familygrams and things, but they were very difficult to use. We would maybe communicate through some radio transmissions and things with family, but they would never give you had one of your parents passed away or something. They're not going to tell you that while you're out at sea. You're going to get that news when you get back in. So
that is a crazy. Wasn't on my bingo card for.
I forget about it sometimes. It's one of those things I wouldn't want to do it again, but I'm glad I did it. I was young and had zero direction in life. I just kind of stumbled into it. It's nothing I thought about. I put zero thought into it. I was literally been kicked out of college. I'm walking around the streets of the community that I was in. I can't go to school. I don't have a good job. Walked by a recruiting office, and it was like, well, why don't I do that? And then got in there, well, yeah, you should do this. And then, well, how about submarines? Well, sounds good to me. So there was zero
quota
thought
of the day
and planning, but I just kept, that's one of the things, like working in a hospital, I'm surrounded by brilliant people. There's not room for duds in a hospital.
Yeah.
Submarines, wow. I mean, I found myself all the time like, why am I here? Everybody's MIT grads, Stanford grads, Naval Academy grads, and I'm surrounded by the smartest engineering folks, weapons folks, and I'm like, wow, how am I with this group of people? And I feel the same way in a hospital, like, when I interact with, our providers and our, just the people that work here, the technical staff, whether that's IT or lab techs, x-ray techs, I'm like, I can't compete with these people. They are just brilliant.
I got to know, do you have any real close calls when you're on the submarine? Like, if we didn't, roll this way instead of the other way, that could be real bad.
Yeah, there's lots of those. When you're
is it more at risk of being attacked, or is it more of a risk of like some underwater hazard or something breaking on the vessel?
Doing what we were doing, by far the most dangerous thing was underwater collisions, because you're following somebody that doesn't, imagine you're trying to follow somebody in a car, but you don't have any windows.
Yeah.
And they don't know you're behind them or what, and so that was probably by far, and then just the dangers of the environment, deep ocean stuff is not tiddlywinks.
Yeah.
It's a very tough environment. It's tough on everything, equipment, and you got all that high pressure, and you've got serious weapons on board.
Yeah, and which all have to be able to withstand that pressure too, which is so amazing.
Yeah, you just and you're carrying nuclear weapons, and just it's very serious business.
Did you ever almost have to press the big red button, or whoever does that on the?
No, we drilled for that a lot, and if we came close, you would know about it as much as I would. It just, I think we had some world events. Things happen that none of us know about because there are people in the know, and it's just not something they talk about. But over time, things begin to kind of leak out, or I think the closest by far was the Cuban Missile Crisis, where it sounds to me like the officers in Cuba had permission to launch and chose not to.
I did hear something about that recently.
The Soviet, some of the Soviet nuclear subs, they did not have the concentration and safety we had, and so there was they made a couple of movies about it, but lost control of their reactors, and potentially could have ruined our entire eastern seaboard. With nuclear contamination and things like, there's a lot of risk that happens, and just by divine intervention, it just didn't go that way. And so
one of the most amazing stories I've ever heard was, I want to say it was called the Squalus, that was up by New Hampshire. It was a submarine that I think they had a intake pipe that ruptured or something, started flooding the sub, and they weren't super deep. They were just drilling right off the coast of New Hampshire, I believe. And they had there was some loss of life. I think there ended up being a small explosion or something inside, and they had to shut off that end of the sub, and then they were basically just run down to hours of oxygen left, and they used one of those diving bells.
Yeah.
It was like a brand new technology. I think this was back in the 50s or 60s.
Yeah.
Brand new technology, and they would it was able to carry like two people off the sub at a time, and they'd lower what they have like a cable or something that they tethered to the sub, like right at the hatch, and then it would be this big watertight enclosure that would go from the ship down to the sub, and then it would open up and maintain a watertight seal with the top of the sub, and then like two guys plus the guy who's running the diving bell down could fit in there at a time. And like you're saying, it's over 100 people or something that had to. And
it is kind of interesting. So in sub school, you learn how to run that and operate in that escape hatch. And then the first time that we went out on operations, the last thing that was done before we shipyard workers came over and they welded the escape hatches shut. And I'm like, hey, what are we doing here? And it's like, well, guys, don't tell your moms about this, but we don't have no escape hatch.
That's spooky.
And what's and kind of the theory is those things had come open underway, and they start clanking and banging, and then you're
done.
It's not that it's going to flood. It's the outer piece. You cannot have that come open. It would make noise, and so and then
it'd make noise, and then you'd be prone to be dead in the water.
And basically, for just a minuscule amount of time, would we be operating in water that's shallow enough now in modern submarine activity to where a diving bell would be, you couldn't do it.
So the rest of the time it's just you're in a tomb.
But if you remember this last Soviet boat that sank, the Kursk.
I'm not familiar
but anyway,
with that
they had a diving bell that they were able to get it, but it was too late. But they had people that survived the explosion in the engine room, but they succumbed to being cold and running out of oxygen. But they did get a diving bell on that, and the Swedes, I think, actually did it. And when we went on ops, they welded them shut, so there wasn't any option for that. It's a one-way ticket.
Oh, man.
That's a fascinating story. I had no idea that was going to be on.
Yeah.
I think we should just change the podcast to Submarine.
Submarine stories. Well, while we got you, an expert in rural healthcare, I am curious. Let's just start right with the big meat of on the bone, the big beautiful bill.
Yeah.
So it's going to change rural healthcare dramatically, but I don't understand how.
Yeah, so that was a massive tax bill, just massive tax bill. And so when you there's this like there's this initial like the hospital community, we would talk about Medicaid cuts. And and supporters of the big beautiful bill HR1 would say, well, there aren't any Medicaid cuts, and as a matter of fact, we're going to spend more money next year than we did this year, and there's just this kind of technical argument going back and forth, and in a lot of ways you could say, well, yeah, okay, you're both right, but just if we look at pure math, we're talking about $1 trillion, that we were expecting that we would get paid on the vehicles, the complicated vehicles through the Medicaid payment program. So you've heard, you may have remember this, that there were people referring to provisions in the in how Medicaid is paid, is that's like whereas Medicare is purely a federal government or a federal program, whereas Medicaid is a partnership between states and the federal government. And so there's this really complicated, if I explained it to you in detail, we'd be here for 6 hours and then you'd all have headaches. But basically, there's this thing called provider taxes and directed payments. And so essentially what that is that hospital communities, hospitals, we pay a tax. We tax ourselves, and then we draw down what's called directed payment from the Medicaid program. And so some states, not Iowa, by the way, but some states were like, okay, that program can't work without the state's involvement in that. It's, so the state is the partner in that. So the hospitals pay a tax, and then the state pulls down a higher percentage of the Medicare payment through directed payments, and then they distribute that to hospitals. So there were, I think, over 300 directed payment programs across the country. Iowa only has 2. There's the main one for all Iowa hospitals, and then the University of Iowa has their own. And so the way that became, sometimes people started referring to that as money laundering. Which was a scary thing for me when I think about a payment mechanism that is crucial to our economic survival being referred to as money laundering. I'm like, oh my gosh, how are we going to correct this narrative or talk about this in a different way? So what was happening is some states were saying, oh, hey, because we're helping you through this program, we want to assess a fee. and then state is going to use that money how we want. So if you think of Iowa's directed payment program was like $1.5 billion. Imagine some of the other states, like how much money we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And so if a state says, well, okay, we want to take 20% of that as a fee, and then we're going to use that for public schools, or we're going to use that for roads, or
so the money that's coming in from the federal level, they're
gets
swiping a percentage.
They're shaving
yeah,
some off.
and
that passed like that.
Yeah, that's been going on forever, and so that's not the intent of the program. Yeah. But it's people get states are struggling with their own budgets and how this all works. But as usual, Iowa did it by the book, very conservatively did that. The state takes out a fee that's directly relative to the costs they have, because they have to hire people to administer the program. Yeah. The Iowa Hospital Association administers the program on behalf of Iowa hospitals. They take a small fee, but I wouldn't want to tell you the exact percentage, but way up into the 90s goes to where it's supposed to go, to the hospitals.
Compared to some states where...
Yeah, massive amounts of that money's going somewhere else.
I don't think you'll get yourself in any trouble here, but what are some of the states that were taking huge amounts?
Your usual suspects are at the top of that list.
So like places like Illinois, New York,
I mean they're taking some big percentages, but also I'm pretty sure Texas had a pretty good chunk. And I mean it was if you're trying to work on it, this really wasn't a red or blue sort of thing. It was this.
How strong is the state government?
How much corruption is?
And so just kind of what are your budget constraints, and what arguments are you making about the program? And clearly, like a lot of government programs that I'm involved with, is that there is this, which I want to kind of get to a point that I think is incredibly important about how healthcare is funded. But essentially, it starts off as this incredibly thoughtful and important way to support the health care for the people that we take care of. And then it goes into the bureaucracy, and then you get a few fingers in the cookie jar, and then you get some over here, and then by the time it filters down to the patient that actually gets the care, and we're trying to pay for this, it's been diluted tremendously. And I could go on and on about all kinds of government payment programs that are related to healthcare. And so I could go through directed payments, provider taxes that we've talked about a little bit, which was directly in that big, beautiful bill. And I should stay on that, because one of the things that we were able to I guess maybe negotiate or to talk about is that if you pull out $1.5 billion day one from healthcare in Iowa, and you're talking about a massive problem. We don't have those kind of margins to just all of a sudden day one do that.
Who's when you say we negotiated, who's we?
Lots of people were talking about this for sure, but I think most of the credit goes to the Iowa Hospital Association, that is very organized, very recognized. So
they went to D.C.
Yeah, we all did. Yeah, and we had a small group of us that are, and myself included. I am very passionate about health policy. I'm very interested in policy. I can separate myself from my personal political beliefs, and I can work with anybody when I'm trying to figure out how to fund to take care of the people that I love here around our community.
And just behind the scenes, I can vouch for that. I've seen you go against, well, this is what I believe personally, but you're the person in charge, and you're the one, and we need to make good decisions here. I've seen you do that. So, and you, at one point, were you the president or chairman of the board?
Yes.
You're not currently, though, are you?
No, I'm still on the Iowa Hospital Association's board, but I've served all the positions on the executive committee, including the chair of the board, and so that was during this time.
And you said you negotiated instead of ripping out $1.5 billion. What did you like? What are they doing now?
So, and right now the program is still in place. So when somebody says there's been no cuts, that's true, but it's coming. And so in July of 2028, it starts to scale down. And so what ends up happening is the term that they use is that it's going to scale down by 10% a year till it gets to the upper limits of Medicare payments, which means essentially the taxes that we pay would be equal to it goes away. It's zero.
Okay.
So then you would just, you would disband the program. So, so that directed payment program, like when you're trying to figure out like how to, that I'm careful about casting stones at people. For the people that voted against it, if it was me personally, I'd have voted against it. But I also have to say I was not in that seat, and I don't understand the pressures to get on board or to the pressures to vote against it, to vote for it. I'm very careful about casting stones because you have to fund the federal government. I mean, there are things that have to be funded, and if anybody's looked at current funding, we're in a big deficit. And then we were talking about the economic issues that every family might suffer if the tax increases, took effect, and so, they took money out of this spot. And so like when you think about, I don't know, I think there's an old famous saying of, like John Dillinger, why do you rob banks? And it's like, well, because that's where the money is. Mm-hmm. And when the federal government needs money, big money, to do something about the deficit or to do something about taxes or whatever, there's only the big places to go to are defense. And does anybody see any path of massive decreases in defense spending? No. I don't see that happening. Social Security. Social Security.
Yeah.
Well, that's not going to happen. Yeah. And then Medicare, Medicaid. That's typically a big target. And one of the reasons that it's a big target, because it's a very complicated program. Extremely complicated, and the payment mechanisms behind it. So people don't understand them. And then when I explain them to people, they'll go, well, that's dumb. Why would you do it that way? And it's like, well, but that's how I get paid. And so all these programs, and I could give you a list of 10 of them, are built on top of the fundamental fact that we are underpaid for taking care of up to 60+% of the people we take care of. So, for instance, this would be like Casey's, Quick Star, selling gas for less than the gas station is paying for it.
Simply because you can't get blood out of a turnip.
Right.
Somebody shows up there.
They underpay us for knowingly. They know this. That if you come in and you're a Medicare patient and you need a surgery here at the hospital, they know that my payment for that service is going to be less than the cost wow. that for me to do it.
Who's they? Who's they know?
The hospital.
The federal government, CMS. It's in the government mechanisms. So what happens is, like you would go, well, Kevin, how are you not bankrupt? Because they set up special programs. And they set up these special programs, and no one has really developed the appetite to pay us appropriately in the first place,
Okay.
And the
so
reason
that 1.5 billion is just that special program.
yeah, that's a special
it's
program.
It's a stopgap.
Yeah. So that is what we've been living on. But the problem is when I explain that program to the general public, or any rational person, they would go, well, I don't like how that works.
Yeah.
I don't like what states are doing with Medicaid dollars, or I just don't. I think that's a convolute, and $1.5 billion, that's too much, and all these things. But there are other programs, and then what they'll do is some of these programs are year to year. So if you change the base payment of what you're paying for, that kind of becomes forever, and it's super scary when they're trying to put budgets together. So in my experience, the federal government is way more likely to set up some special little program that's wildly complicated, and you may or may not get it down the road, versus let's go to the fundamental issue is that you are underpaying providers, doctors, hospitals, on your government payers, which in a lot of places is the majority of the people that you take care of. So you just don't have the volume.
You mean people on government health care is what you're saying?
Yeah, then that's, Medicare, Medicaid, any of the other.
Yeah.
So there's a term that, and maybe you've heard, it's called cost shifting. So forever, since I've been involved in healthcare, is that we knowingly say, we don't provide that, but I've heard of people that have had to take a helicopter ambulance ride. You're talking less than a 15-minute ride, and they got a $50,000 bill. It did not cost $50,000 to fly that helicopter, for 15 minutes. But you got charged that $50,000 because the 10 people before you didn't pay anything. So this whole cost shifting thing over to the private sector. So when most people have an employer-based healthcare plan, those folks, those plans, those companies are being overcharged to make up for the underpayment of government programs, and that's how the system has worked. And then companies kind of got to the point where, hey, we can't do this no more. It's too it is. Healthcare is too expensive for the average person out there. But you got a big chunk of people that we could really get into a lot here, but healthcare is this weird thing where you got a big percentage of people that they could care less what it cost, because what it cost is not what they pay. They have insurance. So I don't care what it costs. And so that's a bad economic model, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah, the power of incentives is overwhelming in the human condition. And when we separate what we're having to pay from outcomes, that's not a good model. It's like a kid who never has to actually pay for anything they get, whether it's a car or a popsicle or whatever.
Or they get full control over the TV.
Yeah.
They're not gonna say, oh, you know what? It's been 5 hours. I should probably go and fold some laundry for Mom.
Or maybe it's somebody else.
Well, the same thing's happening with homeowners insurance as well, where I just got my updated policy for the next year in the mail yesterday.
That's fun mail.
And I just noticed that what a lot of the different limits have been reestablished, and I think a lot of that we have had some crazy storms for the last 5 years, well, even longer, since 2020. Wasn't that when the first derecho went through?
Derecho came through, yeah.
And I think we've had one or two. I know for sure we've had at least another one, maybe even two derechos since then that have swept through Iowa. And so there has been more large scale weather damage problems, but I think people probably have always done this to some degree. Oh, I got a little hail on my roof. Better call the insurance and maybe I can get a new roof out of this. But and I don't see them around as much anymore. But for a time in there, there were these storm chaser contractors who'd go and hit every house on the block and be like, better get those gutters checked, better get that siding checked. And I noticed that the out-of-pocket deductible for hail damage to your siding is, for my policy, went from $1,000 to $5,000. And it's the same situation. Everyone was treating that as a cash out time to anytime a storm rolled through to get the whole outside of their house up to
to get people to make that shift, though, is like, if you think about like what are some solutions that could make some fundamental change in how people interact with their own healthcare economically. So if you think about your auto insurance, when you go to get your oil changed or a new set of tires, you don't turn that into your insurance. That insurance is for catastrophic sorts of things.
I would say, the difference between healthcare and health insurance, I think.
Yeah,
we don't. Sorry.
It's a very important topic, because you would have to ask people to make a fundamental change and you have to remember, a lot of people like what they got. Like they understand, like good people in Knoxville, great people, don't like the idea that the underprivileged in our community may not have access to the same health care that they do. But now ask, are you willing to drop your coverage parameters to make it available for other people? Then now that conversation changes a little. Like, I want everybody to have what I have, but I don't want to come down.
But that funding's got to come from somewhere else.
So this idea of somebody like myself, that I am entirely focused on, I have my Knoxville hat that I wear, but like when I'm doing statewide work, I think especially rural Iowans should have the same access to quality care regardless of your zip code. And that's not true. And I want to fix that. But to fix that requires economic investment. And I just got done saying the thing is too expensive to begin with. And so it becomes very difficult to make the necessary changes when most people are like, look, I kind of like what I got, so don't mess with what I got, but go ahead and make the changes. And then we recommend changes, and it's like, well, there's no money for that, And so we're kind of just stuck in this vicious cycle of trying to come up with new payment models on top of a flawed, the old analogy of building a fancy house on a bad foundation. Yeah, it's kind of what we're doing here as it relates to the economics around healthcare.
I think a logical progression for a lot of people has been, and nations. Well, and let's just nationalize our healthcare. Let's have it be government provided, so everyone pays into socialistic healthcare, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen people from those countries comment, yeah, this is the greatest thing. You don't understand how it works. Then I've also heard the other side where...
You know who says it's the greatest?
Yeah, I want to know your opinion on it.
The healthy people.
The healthy people?
The healthy people. If you need services, you don't hear this was great. You had to, my Canadian friends.
Yeah. Our neighbors.
That would say, boy, we got it nailed. This kind of everybody has this same level of care. And I'm like, well, I know that not to be true, because if you have the means in Canada, where do you come for your health care when you really need something? Not Canada, you come to the United States.
Interesting.
And so, because the waiting is too long. So, and to kind of give you an example of like a model that I have thought, how could we get there? But the greatest healthcare system that I've ever seen was military medicine.
Why?
Military medicine has absolutely zero perverse financial incentives to withhold something or to give you more than you need. Everybody got what they needed when they needed it, because you had one mission, and that was to keep your fighting force mission ready.
Yeah,
you got to. In other words,
you are as a soldier. You are a tool in the tool.
There was no economic incentive to withhold care or to do more so you could get paid more.
When I was in college, I worked for a marketing company, and it was a small marketing company, and my boss, he was a really cool guy, and I remember him taking me to lunch one day and telling me, Nicholas, the most important thing you'll do in business is name your company. I don't know if that's true or not, but you better believe I was blown away when I met the company Iowa Cover Crop. I mean, it's a brilliant name, but it's a little misleading because you might think, oh, okay, they do cover crops. But they actually do a lot more than cover crops. Basically, if it's not corn and beans, they probably have it. You're talking about grains, alfalfas, lawn mixes, cover crop mixes, forage mixes. They do all sorts of things. In fact, they even have CRP and native mixes. I really like the people who provide those for them. If you are looking for anything that's not corn and beans and seed and you're in Iowa or a state touching Iowa, I highly, highly recommend looking into Iowa Cover Crop. That's iowacovercrop.com. Oh, and they have a new podcast. I really enjoy it. They didn't ask me to put this in the ad. I just wanted to because I've really enjoyed their podcast. Super informational. If you're looking to learn more about cover crops for your farm and how they can apply for your specific situation, you're going to want to check it out. It's called Under the Covers. Again, that's iowacovercrop.com.
Then you're going to argue, but you didn't have the homeless and indigent. You didn't have, the elderly population.
Abandoned children, things like that.
Yes, totally understand that. But the when those economic incentives were not just diminished, they were out of the system. It became a very effective way to provide care because for instance, if a hospital in central Iowa starts providing new kind of surgical services that's really popular with patients and starts drawing people to that facility, the facilities around them go, oh boy, I'm going to have to buy that piece of equipment now. I've got to do that service. Sure. And so you're increasing the cost, you're duplicating services because it's kind of how we're set up, is that there's still that, you're in that economic cycle of competition.
Yeah.
And, obviously competition, the VA is an example of something where I've received, received some of the best care that I've ever received in the VA health system. It gets trashed all the time. Some of it wildly unfair. But they don't have some of the economic incentives about, well, hey, I'm going to stay late tonight because we want to get more patients in and those sorts of things. So there are some trade-offs with these government sponsored programs or, this universal health care. We've heard the term single payer. My goodness, that would be the burdens off what we'd go through to get paid if there was only one payer. That'd obviously probably be the federal government. We wouldn't have all these people that have to just chase down all the rules and denials and all the special protocols that each insurance company is asking for. If there was just a single payer, there would be some streamlining that would have amazing accomplishments. But what if that single payer decides, well, I'm going to pay you less than what that's the scary aspect.
Sure.
So nobody has really figured out the exact right solution.
Yeah.
But what we're currently doing is basically setting up knowingly that the system underpays, but we're going to set up these quote unquote temporary payment schemes, kick that can down the road, and eventually we'll get to the wall. And that wall is going to happen in my lifetime. So certainly your lifetime.
Wow. I want to talk about this.
Let's ask that. What happens when we hit the wall?
Well, there is an argument of saying that how how can you make systematic and fundamental changes on how something works when most people are happy?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to do. When the system is in complete failure, that's when you can make changes.
Right. And then at that point, it's reactionary.
A
lot of damage done.
Just think about
that's Iowa and water quality right now.
Like how businesses are run. Sarbanes-Oxley came about. Well, Enron, I believe. Like this massive. We had our 2008 real estate collapse. We had the Great Depression. A lot of things changed because of that. It put the it's just terrible to think that you have to get there to get people prepared to do something different. But I understand from a policymaker's perspective, how do you go out and sell this to the people who are basically your bosses that put you in, hey, I know you like what you got, but in 10 years, this is going to be a problem. So I want to make some changes you might not like, but trust me, it's for the good. That's a hard conversation to have.
Goes back to that kids with the marshmallow we've talked about on the podcast a bunch.
Well, I'd just be curious. I know I'm dominating the questions here, Nick. I'm sorry. If you could, and I'm not asking you to totally restructure all of how we fund our country's medicine, but what would be some logical changes? Like for me, when they were reevaluating overall, I wasn't a big fan of the Big Beautiful Bill for a lot of different reasons. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I gotta be very careful how I say this. One of the ways, or one of the things that I was open to consideration was not doing away with SNAP, but saying, and I think Iowa even did some stuff on the state side of this as well. You can't buy Coke with your SNAP credits. You can't buy candy bars. You can't buy zebra cakes. It's meant to be for the stuff that keeps you and your family healthy and fueled with proper nutrition. That to me that's a good. You're not taking away. The family's not going to starve. Yes, it stinks that now a poor single mom can't get her kid a candy bar and make his day. But at some point, the candy bar is a luxury item, and
they're a net negative on humanity.
Candy bar?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, better be careful with how you say that, not the people.
So the candy bar.
Yeah. But
better for the kid.
So to me, that is a common sense adjustment that helps make that money. You can maybe make a dollar go further for the person's health, which is what we're trying to do. It's a nutrition program. Are there things like that you could see happening with, like maybe you got to have a BMI within this window, or they do that for life insurance. Your cholesterol has to be this level. You can't be pre-diabetic, or your premium goes significantly up.
Yeah.
Is there stuff like that you think would help, or what do you think?
We've dabbled in that space, but the problem is on the provider side. Like for instance, let's say if people had a healthier lifestyle, I'd have less heart attacks come into our ER. Okay, true, but heart attacks are still going to happen,
right?
And so on the provider side, we are going to take care of people how they come to us. Period. Mm-hmm. Now we would help them understand, maybe be more involved in education, maybe more involved with schools and nutrition information and all these kinds of things. But it's going to be super hard for us to, say, well, because of the lifestyle choices that you chose, you drank too much alcohol, and now you have liver cancer, and you don't get the same chemo that the person.
Right.
You know, do you see where
It puts all the pressure on the provider.
Yeah, and we just don't do that. We take care of people as they come to us. Now we do participate, and I also with the American Hospital Association work on policy boards for nationwide policy ideas. Like one of the things that's happening from a policy perspective that I think is crazy interesting is the health policy implication of all the GLP medications that are running around now.
Yeah.
And so that is creating a health policy thing that we got to kind of wrestle with. Now, if the insurance carriers or, you know, there was some sort of governmental mandate around those sorts of things, you know, we would have to live within those parameters. But we just live in a world in the hospital community, you know, the physicians and the providers that are here, there's just no differentiation of how you got to where you are. We just take care of you.
Yeah.
But from a public policy perspective of what you're saying is that if we could reduce Iowa's BMI, we would use less health care.
Right.
Yeah, I heard a doctor on maybe Diary of a CEO.
I thought it was Dr. Oz you were watching.
Dr. Oz is great. It was great. It was a great show. I guess he's not doing his thing anymore. He's over in the administrative building. But that they said that is in our lifetime going to be the greatest lifetime expectancy technology change, because the truth is when you're overweight, you put a lot of stress on your body, or even a little bit of stress on your body in 100 different ways. And over the course of 40 years, that takes a toll on your body and can't handle it. And that doesn't happen every single time, but it is like one of the biggest root causes of so many of the things we deal with. I interviewed Dr. Haynes, and he was the one telling me this. Yeah, if we could just control how much we ate and how many calories we intook, that would be even more than exercise, which he said was a big deal. That would alleviate a ton of the sickness.
That's where the GLP discussion comes into place, because now these medications don't come with, nothing comes without it, nothing's completely void of downside.
Yeah.
You know, there are downsides but when I talk to these physicians that are on this policy group with me, and they're talking about their large panels with thousands of patients, and all of a sudden those that are on GLPs, they're like, not only did they lose weight, all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, this group doesn't have near as much liver disease, cardiac disease, dementia, depression, suicide, yada, yada, yada. And so they're seeing this major change by carrying around less weight that implicates a lot of things across our life. And they're like, but the problem is the only people that are taking those medications are the ones that can afford those.
Yeah.
So it's becoming
$450 a month or something.
Yeah. There's this, but anyway, it's but technology, new medications, just kind of, there's a lot of bright spots in the world. Of course, you know, I talk about the doom and gloom of you know, the economics around care, but I still get that. You know, I think about the time that you know, when kids are going to learn, you know how they, you know, used to treat cancer back in the day. They gave people these medications that were essentially poisons, or, you know, they used radiation to, you know, like what we do now to, you know, preserve life. There will be a day when we don't do that, because we will have figured this out. And, you know, and the new technologies, the new high-powered computer systems making treatment protocols, instead of specific, or just generally speaking for a general population, being able to do treatment protocols that are very specific to you individually, and just how much better that works. All these things are going to be making us better, healthier, but it's, it hits this thing of how do you pay for that, and or how do you make that available to everyone?
Yeah.
The pharma. So that one of the big things I've heard, it's talked about a lot really in the past couple of years, but for years, is the United States pays more for its medicine to the pharma companies who develop it than other countries, right? Is that true? Are people in the United States getting raked over the coals on pharma prices, or is it just standard? They're just cost plus, or they're playing the market well enough? Or
when you take a complex problem like drug costs and you apply a simplistic answer such as big pharma's greedy and we're going to rip off Americans to take care of our greed, I think you're always missing something. For instance, like I would want to better understand. I see here inside the medical center every day miracles. I mean, miracles happening because of big pharma that we like to trash. They are creating medications that are keeping our loved ones alive. They are doing that. The people that developed those drugs, designed those drugs, did all the research. I think they need paid. And who's going to do that? Should the rest of the world help subsidize that? There's also been this idea of, what if these great thinkers in pharma decide, we're not going to be doing this in the United States. We're going to go somewhere else. We're going to set up shop in China or Taiwan or wherever else. Do you want to lose that? Do you want to, lose that, that intellectual? So anyway, my whole point is I'm not a big fan of big pharma and a lot of the things that I have to deal with. I just see, my goodness, these expenses are runaway and things like that. But I also give myself pause and say, remember that person you just said hello to in the hallway? They are not here today without big pharma.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like how do we come to
You're saying no blanket statements? That it is a nuance, and I really appreciate that. That's one of my favorite things about you is you put on a scale. There's almost never full weight on one side of an argument. Yeah. There's stones on either side, and then we got to figure out which side actually weighs more. But
I got a question on the future here. You're talking about, especially, and that's been one of the things that's been touted why we need AI. That's gonna solve complex medical problems that have been stumping us for decades. I've also heard that, this was a few years ago, there was this phrase, I haven't heard it in a while, so maybe the projection is dead now, but they used to say, if you're in your 30s or younger right now, you need to be preparing to live to be 120 years old. And that sounds great, right? But I used to be a teacher in Illinois, and I was a part of the Illinois Teachers Pension, TRS is what they call it, teacher retirement system, I think is what it was. And there was one day they had a TRS rep come to the school and talk to us about our pensions. And she said, she just had like some interesting trivia about TRS. And, one of them was like, guess how old the oldest TRS member is? And I want to say this woman was 104 years old. She was still drawing a pension from Illinois TRS. And I think I did the math, and she had been retired twice as long as she'd been working, paying into it. And if humans are going to, because of medical advancement, that's happened even when I was a kid. If you saw you saw somebody in their 80s, that was pretty old. A lot of people when they start hitting their 60s, you started. It could be any day for grandpa, and that's drastically changed. Our overall life expectancy really hasn't altered much since I was a kid. I think, what is it, 74 for males and 76 for females, I think, something like that.
Yeah, we've had a couple of drops, which is shocking.
Which I have a great theory on how we should use that for our determining our term limits for our politicians.
Median theory.
But you didn't give it enough credit. The point being, if we end up in that TRS situation where people are now, so now I think we have a declining birth rate overall for a lot of the world. But if people are living longer, then our population could, for at least a while yet, continue to expand just the number of people that are still alive on the planet. And we're having to insure all these people.
But they're not more work years.
Right.
You got 15,
and
20 more
probably
years
more dependent on things like Medicaid.
Yeah.
Is that even possible to fund?
That's an interesting question because anything is possible. I mean, yesterday I was traveling a little bit and I was listening to some of the new stuff that Neuralink is doing.
Yeah.
Very soon the blind will see.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I never would have ever imagined there's a world that somebody's figuring that out for maybe folks that have never had eyesight, to be able to see. And so I think I'm so interested in this that I volunteered to chair the State of Iowa Hospital Association's Innovation Council. So this is where we're bringing in experts around the country to tell us, like with AI, like how to deploy it properly, have the policies and guardrails around it. I'm just so fascinated around what you're talking about. But honestly, I think where the emphasis is going to be is not going to be in quantity of years. It's going to be in quality of years. And Dr. Haynes and I were joking. I showed him what I wanted my life curve to be.
Yeah.
This is my axis for activity. I want it to go up and flatten out and go flat, and then I want it to hit a cliff and fall off.
Yeah. You want a hockey stick with a little curl at the end.
I don't want no decline over 25 years. I said that. So as my personal physician, I need you to make this happen. And he got a kick out of that. But I mean, in all honesty, this.
Need you to make this happen.
I need you to make this happen.
Those implications are strong.
I don't drag this out. But I think that our advancements are really around there. That and the economics of what you're saying about the retirement plan that you were discussing is that. I can easily see that, maybe my son's generation or the generation that follows him, they will be laughing going, can you believe that people quit working at 62?
Yeah.
Like that. That's, I don't think that's realistic that people will stop working in their 60s. I think people will, hopefully with technology, people will be involved in more meaningful work to them. So, the technology will take, some of those hodrum, mentally unhealthy jobs away, and then people can do meaningful work to them. That's kind of a, pie in the sky view. But honestly, I think people will work longer and have higher quality years because of technology and advancements in healthcare.
I've got this story. So I have a friend, I'm going to leave his name out, but he's very open about the fact that he has autism and he's happy to talk about it. Very smart, very blunt. And we just happened to run into each other at Hy-Vee, checking out at the same time. Hey, how's it going? We're talking about it. And then we both turn our attention to the cashier, a person who is approaching retirement age, maybe retirement age. And they were very concerned about Social Security. We asked how they were doing. They brought it up, and they said, "Can you believe they take that away from us? We've been paying into it for 40 or 50 years." And my friend next to me, who has autism and
whatever part of our brain has a filter, he doesn't have that. He goes, yeah, it's just a shame they spent all that money already. And like no remorse, no like kindness or solidarity, just like, yeah, it's a bummer all that money's gone. It's just like, but that's the reality. She's talking from a social, what's fair, that's great. And as an employer, I could tell the employees, hey, it's fair to pay you $40 an hour. I have $28 an hour. So that's a real reality I want to make happen. I want to have money for you in Medicaid. I want to be able to help pay for your health care. I think that incentives are important, but I want to be able to be there. I want to catch the people in the lowest economic ranking in the society. I want to have a net for them. I want all of those things. The money's not necessarily there. What do we do with that?
Yeah. So a personal opinion that I'll share, and that's all it is a personal opinion because it's wildly controversial. But if you go back, I've seen the math on it. I wouldn't be able to recite it, but it'd be interesting if you go back and look at it. Do you remember George Bush when he made his one of his major administrative initiatives was to privatize Social Security?
Yeah.
And he got trashed on it. There are people that went back and looked at the math. What if that would have passed back in George Bush's tenure? What retirees
Senior?
would have today?
That was senior, right?
Yeah. And what retirees would have compared to theirs. It's shocking. It is absolutely shocking. And I happen to be of the belief that we cheated those people out of that. We cheated these seniors out of that opportunity to take part in the the greatest economy in the world. And, we have our ups and downs, but they would have been so far ahead. But people were so scared of what if.
It goes back to people are happy with what's working.
Yeah, and so just put a little bit more money into it. And so and back to our healthcare changes that at some point we're going to have wholesale changes in how things work because there's not going to be enough people in this country, and I'll argue that we've already reached that point. There's not enough people today working, paying into the system for those that are taking out of the system. Like my grandpa said, he would say, we have more people riding in the wagon than pulling the wagon.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what's happening here. And the reality is, if you're riding in the wagon, you have a legit argument to go, look, man, I pulled for a long time. It's my turn to ride. But at some point, you're going to have to make that cut of, no, get out of that wagon. You got to start pulling again.
Yeah.
And so people aren't going to like that, and it's going to be wildly unpopular. And, from a policymaker's perspective, I don't know how they
Wouldn't it be easier to raise Social Security by 1 year, like one age year, raise it 1 year every 3 years? You know what I mean? And then you could get 3 or 4 years added to it over the next 15 years, and it would be.
Yeah, I think an underrated method for doing that is grandfathering. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you say, and actually this happened to me again in the TRS. I was what'd they call it? Group 2 or something like that. So everyone that had been working for a certain number of years, you were Group 1 TRS, you could retire. I think it was like 57 or 58, as long as you started at 22 fresh out of college and did your 35 years. When my group started, it went to 38 years. And so there was a grandfathering, but you could complain, but you're new here. This is the new rule. And I think that to do something like that, you wouldn't want to do it to people who are 50 and say, guess what? You got to work an extra year. You know what I mean? Most people have been hating their job for the past 30 at that point, and they're counting down the days. But if you did it to people, people just entering into the job market now, I think it could correct itself.
There's no policy around fixing that, but I think just recently they had to move down the the Medicare Trust Fund, by another couple years or so. I think we're at 2033 without fundamental changes. There's no more money for that. And so I think the younger generation, well, I don't know, I'll ask you guys, but do you honestly believe that you're going to be able to draw a Social Security check at 62? Do you think that's going to be around for you?
Yeah, no. that is.
Or should it?
I mean, we do so many Band-Aid fixes to things that's the only reason why I think that it is possible. Right now, looking at the math, I don't think it's possible.
Pensions don't math, and you know that because every single company in the United States ripped them out of their books because they realized, these don't math. What the problem was that government level pensions, they couldn't just rip them out because then they'd get voted out of there because those people want their pensions. Now, companies change it to 401ks. And I am a big fan of, I don't even know what they call it, but having like a public trust bank account or whatever, where each kid when they're born gets $1,000 S&P 500, so that people are incentivized to see the economy grow. But one of the things that I think we should get back to doing, I think this is a common sense thing, is, and I'm a big anti-shame person. Like, I think people hide in shame in all sorts of areas in their life, and I talk through that with my friends. Ken would attest to that. But I think we should shame schlucks. Schlucks are able-bodied.
I think you just made up a word.
Yeah, I did. Able-bodied, perfectly capable people that are drawing significantly more off of society than they're giving. Think of people like young men, 22, 23, 24-year-old men still living with their parents. Nothing wrong with that, but no direction, and they're maybe working a job. I know that sounds stupid. I can list 4 off the top of my head right now, and I don't even hang out with 22-year-olds. You know what I mean? I can list 4. I'm like, you're able-bodied. What is going on here? I think we need to shame schlucks. And then I had a foreign exchange student when I was in high school. She came from Denmark.
Where does the word schluck even come from?
It's a great word.
I'm trying to think of what it's a derivative of.
I know, it's a great word.
Schmuck.
If it's not real, then I'm trademarking it. Schluck. And I'm not saying we need to be working 70 hours a week, blah, blah, blah. The Asian side of my family, they're like, look, you do your time. And to our culture on that side of the family, your time is 60, 70-hour weeks for 40 years. That is just what is expected. They're like, but work-life balance, what are you talking about? And now whether that's right or wrong, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about like generally adding to society.
Or contribute.
Yeah, which is where my my foreign exchange student, good friend in high school, she came from Denmark. And when we were all talking about going off to college, this phrase came out of her mouth all the time. And it was very weird to me at the time. For society. Well, I've been thinking about for society, the better thing is, or I'm wanting to do this for society, or I think that would be bad for society. A lot of her decisions were based on her neighbors. What would be good for, now it wasn't fully that way. She had some say and she did what she wanted to do, but.
Somebody talked about that around 2,000 years ago.
Yeah. The love your neighbors. Ken, actually, you came up with that phrase just the other day.
Oh, did I come up with that? No.
But
I should write it down somewhere.
It's
maybe I should
like
gather some disciples and have them write it down.
Wear a robe.
Yeah.
The cultural issue here, I think, is kind of a big deal. If our generation can't look at Social Security and Medicaid as a problem together, and we just go, well, better be for me, my turn, when I get there, we're screwed. And I have this term that I've been bouncing around in my head. I call it reasonable selfishness. It's someone choosing some selfishness, but it's reasonable. Well, look, everybody else is drawn. Everybody else is getting a new roof right now. Why can't I? I know I only had a couple dents out of hail damage, but I don't know. I've been paying for 12 years. I think it's about time. It's this reasonable selfishness that when you add it across 300 million people, it becomes a very greedy, selfish issue. And now all of a sudden there's all these fingers in Medicaid and we can't actually pay the doctors enough up front with the initial bill. But I want to Two more things I want to chat with you about before we take off today. First, I want to talk about not necessarily, I don't want you to have to announce what you would do at the hospital, but what are CEOs of rural hospitals going to look at first if this $1.5 billion ceases? Like what areas of the hospital and their clinics do they start saying, okay, this is where the cuts are going to have to be made?
They're already doing it.
Oh, really?
It's plans to cut services.
Okay, what?
Oh, wow.
What are the first services going that?
The least profitable.
Okay.
And so where does that become very apparent to people? OB programs are already under huge stress.
Wow.
Okay, and
yeah.
I want to camp on that for a second. I didn't realize this, and I should because my wife is an OB nurse. Iowa is considered to be a place where there's a real shortage of OB care. Is that true?
That is true, and it's getting marketably worse.
And this is going to make.
This is going to make
it much worse,
more difficult. Yeah. When I said earlier that, hey, I think you should have access to the same level of care regardless of your zip code. Right now, I'd have to say, well, except for OB, because I know that's not true. Because we have OB, what we refer to as OB deserts across the state.
Wow.
Between Omaha and Des Moines, there's just a few facilities that still deliver babies, and if those organizations became under stress, that's a lot of distance. That's going to equate to some bad outcomes. That's just one example. Now, there's all kinds of things that hospitals do. It's kind of a weird business to be in. First off, nobody wants what we're selling.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be here, so that kind of makes it a little bit different.
Yeah.
And then when I'll have somebody say, "Hey, Kevin, I think your hospital will do way better if you would just run it like a business."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I have a business degree and I know how to do that, but I promise you won't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I provide a lot of services that are bad business. I do not see any gas pumps around town for the poor people.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't exist, but we provide services to everyone regardless of their ability to pay. And when people say those things, hey, there's some truth in what they say. There's some things that should be better buttoned up on the economic side and how the finances work. Because if you've had a complicated health situation going on with you or a loved one, I can promise you, as your bills come rolling in, you just had this massive, what the heck is this? Now, bills coming in untimely and they're hard to understand and they're coming from every direction. I know that has got to change, but there's a lot of things that go into, why it is as in a lot of things. But that whole concept of why don't you run that hospital like a business?
Mm-hmm.
I can, and you won't like it.
Yeah.
They're, the city. Well, they're not going to be, if they do that, there's no ambulance services.
Yeah.
You're not going to have an ambulance if you want to run it like a business.
Yeah.
We're not going to have an ER. We're not going to have, a lot of the primary care access. And what we would be is what you see in a lot of metropolitan areas. If you wanted me to run this like a business, you'd be able to get your labs drawn here, x-rays, and surgery.
Wow.
Yeah. My wife and I spent way too much time in an ER last March through June. And we were in, are there 3 major hospitals or 2 in Des Moines? I think 2.
Oh, 2 of the big ones, yeah.
We were in both of those. Miserable. I mean, the waiting room was huge. It was just, people were screaming everywhere. And there's not money in ER, and it's interesting to see, but then at one point we had to go
get some scans in a different part of the hospital, and it was like the most pleasant, wonderful part of the hospital because it's easy to put money where you can make money. It's hard to justify spending a bunch of money on an ER where it's just a pit.
Yeah, like like one of the examples, I'm sure I've told you this, that if you have a heart attack or let's say a bad car accident and you got orthopedic fractures all over you, I'll have a multi-million-dollar helicopter sitting here in minutes, and you will be on the operating table within minutes, and there are financial penalties if I don't get that done. It is a machine when you are hurt like that. You come in a mental health crisis, you'd be here for days, weeks. You'll rarely get the exact services that you need, and can be just as serious as, people coming in that are suicidal, can be just as serious as a bad orthopedic fracture. And that's just an example of like something that does not have the economic engine around it like a heart attack does. Yeah. We have hospitals that specialize in cardiac care, from trying to prevent heart attacks and tracking you and doing screenings. And then when people do have a heart attack, the best and brightest there to take care of you and step down units so you can get back to your job. Now imagine mental health. You don't have any of that. Yeah. Or very little of that. And so those are just some of those systemic problems that we've been working on for a long time, but the economics of it just don't support it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to talk about before we take off is talent. I was just at the eye doctor, Dr. Mazdam and Dr. Mazdam, and they had a third wing built out, their clinic, because they had another eye doctor, and then I believe she stepped down for something. It was like it was all good, but she stepped down. Well, now they want to fill this with another eye doctor, right? And they can't, because eye doctors are capped on how much they can get paid because of insurance.
Sure.
Right? Which I understand the pros of it. Now I'm about to explain the cons. So the one incentive of moving to rural Iowa when you aren't from rural Iowa is, well, maybe you get paid more there. Maybe you could go and pay that doctor more. Well, they can't, because they can't get paid from their patients more because of insurance. So now they have no negotiating leverage with anyone. Why would anybody come to Knoxville, Iowa, unless they're from here? Why would anybody come here when they could be in Des Moines with all the amenities, when they could be at Iowa City, when they could be in Minnesota, or 20 minutes outside of Des Moines on one of those cute little towns like Carlisle or something? Why would they come all the way here? Now, I think there are a lot of draws to Knoxville, but they're harder to explain, and they're harder to weigh in. It took my wife about a year. Now she loves it. She's like, I can't imagine why someone would live in a big city now that I'm here. And so, but it takes a while. It's hard to negotiate that over a table. And so pulling in the talent of doctors and is it secondary care provider, like PAs and nurse practitioners, becomes very difficult. And I guess what's that going to look like for what direction is that trending? Is there any positive outlook on that changing? What's going on there?
It's and I'm going to talk about rural America. It's trending in a horrible direction, and there is nothing on the horizon that says it's going to get better.
Wow, that was awesome.
Yeah, isn't that uplifting? Great. But on the flip side of that is technology is going to be a huge help, giving you access to providers when you need it.
Talking like
telehealth is going to keep getting better. More of this virtual medicine, and then because rural America would not have health care without PAs and nurse practitioners. They're crucial to the system, but they have to be appropriately deployed. And so how do they get that medical backup, MDDO backup when they need it? A lot of times that's going to come via technology. So that's going to, our demands for doctors, nurses, technologists is going to far exceed the available people to do it. So we have to come up with different solutions, because you cannot use the model of, well, I'm just always going to have this number of nurses to take care of our community. I know for a fact it's going to be harder to maintain that number. So what are you going to do? What am I going to do to make investments in the right technology? And so we've done that. Like one of the things that I like to, basically do is that I know there's a healthcare shortage in rural America, and I understand that, and I want to work on the solutions. But here in Knoxville, I refuse to participate. So that's kind of how that's unfolded for us. Trying some different things before other people did. I would say we were one of the first facilities that I know of that really took on new inpatient care models. We made big investments in lifestyle, that family work-life balance. When I talk to a lot of the, physicians from a generation ago, and you talk about, well, what regrets do you have? I absolutely love this profession of being a doctor. It was my calling in life. My only regret is I was an absent father. I was an absent mother. And I just kind of refused to think that that's how it has to be. Yeah. And so we worked on that, and we invested in that. And, a lot of things I can't take credit for. We had some great recruiting wins, and kind of like that snowball rolling down the hill, good providers want to work more than anything with other good providers. Yeah. And so that's like this self-fulfilling prophecy of, hey, these folks that are in residency, where should I go work? Oh, I'm thinking about maybe staying in rural Iowa. Well, who's at Knoxville, blah, blah, blah. And I know them, and I've heard about them. Yeah. And so it's just been a really good strategy for us. And I don't know, probably there's some element of luck in there that we were able to pull that off. But I know that our talent access to physicians and mid-level providers, I would stack them up against anybody. I mean, anybody. That's how good this team is. But that's not the norm at all.
Yeah. So, something that really came out of COVID, and I'm sure it existed beforehand, but this is talking from my understanding with my wife being a nurse, and she was not just in this area. We lived out in the Quad City area, and so she was at one of the bigger hospitals there, and they would get a lot of traveler nurses to fill out the staff for these hospitals. And during COVID, you just saw this like new wave of all these nurses that were leaving permanent jobs to take on these traveling contracts to staff all around the country, and
for way more money. Like it was like 50 or 60% pay increase.
I know.
In the most extreme cases.
Yeah. No, for sure. I know of lots of examples by name.
Yeah.
Where nurses gave up their job in Des Moines and the next day went to work at the same job on the same floor in the same unit.
Wow. Just as a traveler
and doubled their income.
I got to imagine that is not good for the work environment of the hospital itself or the health system, but also that's got to be hard on communities where you have these good paying, upper middle class level jobs that now technically are transient. And now if they're anchored down by they got kids in school, their spouse works at local company, that helps for sure. But even then, she's had friends who husband and kids are 3 hours away doing their thing 3 or 4 days a week while they're out here working, you know? And I imagine that even across. I had a friend from college who did this. He would live in different states. He'd go all around the Southwest, living in all these different states. He'd get a short term lease on an apartment, sign an 8-week, 12-week contract, maybe renew if he really liked it there, and then he'd pick up and leave and he'd go somewhere else. I mean, I just can't imagine that. I understand the need. You got to have nurses. You can't staff the hospital without them. But is there a way that hospitals can get out of that? It just seems like you're putting the fire out with.
Well, they have for the most part, and there are implications with that, of course. So, if you use COVID as the example, the pandemic, a better way to put that is that, there wasn't even any. I didn't even know of any patients, COVID positive patients in our community. Yet my hospital was shut down.
Yeah.
Could not provide services that fund everything except for like emergency services. And a lot of people left the profession, and then as the wave came, nobody came back.
Mm-hmm.
Or not enough. And then travelers are a necessary element of the healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
But it can't be, when it became your primary workforce, that upset the apple cart. That's not how things work. It's not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially what large hospital systems did, they just said, stop, we're not doing it. Not going to do it. So when these traveler contracts are up, we're not renewing them.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the reality? What's the implication of that? They close beds. They close wings. And so what's the downstream effect of that? I have a patient here in Knoxville that exceeds our clinical capabilities of being able to take care of. Hey, I need to transfer them to Des Moines.
Yeah.
No. Mm-mm. During the pandemic, we'd actually, I think our furthest example, I can remember, we moved somebody to Houston, Texas.
Wow.
And it was like, because there was there weren't
no
any beds open.
Yeah.
And so what that really indicated to myself is that, it's a whole other topic, but I'm just saying that it shed a light on how fragile the healthcare system is.
Mm-hmm.
And also, we have kind of been running like a business from the perspective of we don't keep excess capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in other words, I have enough staff here at the Knoxville Hospital and Clinics to take care of our community on normal days.
Mm-hmm.
I am not staffed for the worst case scenario where a third of our community gets sick. I couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like there's not any really built-in buffer in the healthcare system. Every hospital is set up for kind of normals. But when you have a situation, if we were to have another pandemic, let's say something that was, clinically more significant than COVID, we're in real big trouble because we don't even have the capacity that we had previous to the previous pandemic. So, and all of this is built on the fact that there's not enough funding, there's not enough economics in that. But also, I'm not casting stones at this because you look at what we spend in healthcare in this country, and it is a huge dollar amount that our country is shouldering. Mm-hmm. Yet you have people like me going, well, it's not enough. Well, the really smart kids in the room are going to have to redesign this because that's the only answer out.
Man, well, we really, really appreciate you joining us. And we didn't really get into this, and we don't need to. But for everyone listening, Kevin's like not just a big deal in Knoxville, and he's a leader in how hospital policy gets made. He is pinged by people that are a big deal, and part of that is you're a great leader. But when you came to Knoxville, there was like 5 days of cash in the bank. That means like every day they only had enough cash to finish the week out, and they hope to get more cash before the end of the week. And he totally turned that around. Knoxville Hospital was on the verge of closing down, and now it is 10% of the staff of the employees in Knoxville work for Knoxville Hospital, or 10% of the workforce is here at Knoxville Hospital, and it's a big deal. I am really grateful for you personally, but even just on a larger spectrum, I understand how big a deal rural hospitals are for Iowa. So.
No, I appreciate you saying that. But the one thing that I always like to also remind myself is that, and I appreciate those comments, but certainly worked hard and had a lot of sleepless nights. But nobody comes here, except on occasion like you, nobody comes here to the hospital to see me. And I keep that in mind all the time, is that it is our staff, the physicians, our mid-level providers. Those are the hot rods around here that, people want to come see when they're in trouble. They're scared, they're hurt, they're sick. They're not coming here to see me. I just try to create the environment where they can do their thing. But we're so blessed to have this team that we have here that, like I've been in healthcare, pretty much my whole life, minus a couple little submarine jaunts. But my entire adult life has been, healthcare. So I basically can see and know who are the best providers in the state. Who would I send my loved ones to? And they're right here.
Man.
And so that's what makes this a great place, great job.
Yeah. Well, we all know rural communities, they live and die by the leaders and the people that live in them. And it takes all of us, just like conservation. Conservation happens just one mind at a time.